Brought to you by Exabeam, I'm Steve Moore, and this is the new CISO. Alan, thank you so much for being here. For the uninitiated, as I always say, who are you and what do you do?
First of all, thank you, Steve. It's an absolute pleasure to join you here today and an honor to contribute to this podcast series. Very keen to have this chat with you and share some of my insights and professional steps I've taken over the past few years within my career. So I'm Alan Lucas. I'm the current CISO at Worldstream and Greenhouse Datacenters. With over a decade of experience within the cybersecurity industry, currently leading security strategies for mission critical IT infrastructure and cloud environments. And I have a true passion for security, positioning it not just as a protection mechanism, but as a catalyst for growth, empowering organizations to innovate with confidence. Where I truly believe ultimately that everyone doing their part within the cybersecurity space is building a digital safe society. Step by step, day by day, no matter how little your impact is. Together we're trying to make our digital society safe.
A fantastic mission and a great intro. Usually guests don't have their thoughts together quite so well. So that's really good. No, I think that's a great kind of way. And for those listening, I would encourage everyone to think about, and I know this is not a new concept, but to think about what is it that we say when we introduce what we do and who we are and what our mission is professionally, right? And you hit on a lot of really good points there. Not meaning for it to be a teaching moment, but it kind of was a teaching moment as well, even in your introduction. So I appreciate you sharing there, but you sort of broke down kind of who you were, your experience, the mission, and the reasons why you do what you do, and your beliefs, sort of
So
as you move forward. Yeah, which I really appreciate.
no, definitely. I mean, making social impact is very close to my heart, and I believe, as a professional, but also, me personally, that's also what makes being a CISO fun, I think.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
which it not always is fun. There are unfun days. So being a champion for the fun, I think, helps certainly.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I always ask because I'm always super curious. We all come from different places and have different starts. How did you get your start in technology and specifically technology security?
Actually, ever since I was a child, I wanted to do something different. I always wanted to be an architect or a firefighter. And I think I ended up being both within the cyber realm, a firefighter, essentially tackling those cyber emergencies. But yeah, ultimately ended up doing completely something different than an architect or firefighter. Although I think maybe in the future I'll become a firefighter on a voluntary basis, which is a goal when I'm further down the line within my career. The way I moved to cybersecurity and to information security is essentially gaming and computers in general. So what I found really interesting as a child already is how systems and software in particular work and figuring out the underlying interconnectivity between end users and those systems. So I remember vividly playing a game called Pinball on Windows, where if you specifically put in a phrase, you get a massive amount of pinballs, so you could up your score during your game. I was always intrigued to see how that worked and why it worked. So I think that's really sparked my early hacker mindset and created that point in time to start exploring software engineering and cybersecurity.
You mentioned earlier when we spoke about the notion of your father being an architect and then you wanting to be a fireman. I think that's pretty interesting, kind of where we go and what that tells us. So, what is it we want to be when we're young? I've maybe mentioned this before, but I thought when I was a fair amount younger in my 20s, I thought I wanted to be a police officer. And I learned much later about myself that I would have made a very bad police officer. Maybe a good detective, but you don't start there. But there would have been a lot of rules. Funny enough, I wanted to protect, but there's a lot of rules I don't necessarily agree with. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And so your firefighter, that sort of saving, protecting, giving to the community is interesting. I just read an article about someone who was in Wall Street, who this just this week, who had made a bunch of money on Wall Street and then quit. He stayed in shape and became a firefighter in New York City. So, which is a very tough. You think of all the problems and the accidents and the hurt people and the drug overdoses and things like this that happen in a big city like this. And so he gives his time that way. So I think that's a very noble thing. One of the
Definitely.
questions, I often have a question on what does a CISO become when they're done being a CISO?
Yeah.
Commonly, it's going into teaching. Sometimes it's consulting. Sometimes it's becoming an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
But I think the notion of even stepping out of technology altogether
Yeah.
could be very interesting
Yeah.
with that. How,
Yeah. But I
how
still currently give that giving back. Yeah, that really strongly resonates with me. So, as of a few years, I'm also part of the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure, where I'm a volunteer, but also a coach, helping young ethical hackers with their personal challenges. But that whole concept of the DIVD, where we try to notify the people behind the systems who are vulnerable and notifying them of security vulnerabilities in order for them to fix those systems. Really resonates with me, and I think um, it maybe it's impacting society in a greater way. It's not doing anything really technical or doing really hard research, but in a way I contribute to that great goal, and it's really fulfilling.
well, so I'm based on the way you described it, and I think I'm generally familiar with what that is. But this vulnerability disclosure group, I don't want to assume, but it sounds like it's an outlet, it's a vehicle for those researchers to safely identify or share a problem without getting into trouble with law enforcement, and then
Exactly.
a safe way for organizations to become aware that they've got a problem and to be notified in a trustworthy way. Is this roughly correct?
Exactly. So that's essentially what we do. So coordinated vulnerability disclosure through a very strict code of conduct. So we follow the laws within the Netherlands, and via that strict code of conduct, we're allowed to do what we do. But essentially, it is ethical hacking and trying to identify weak or vulnerable systems. I think a very noble thing to do, and it's completely voluntarily.
So you mentioned that your role isn't necessarily technical.
Oh,
I'm guessing though. Well, there's a lot of brilliant people in the Netherlands. There's a lot of very technical minded folks, and I'm sure they're very curious and find many interesting things. But the fact that your involvement as a CISO, in a non-technical role, tells me something. It's a tell, in that you probably are more involved to be a good communicator or a maybe even a mentor to some of these people that on both
Yeah,
sides is that maybe you wouldn't choose those words just out of humility, but these are probably some of the goodness that you're bringing to this. Is this am I
definitely. So
yeah
definitely. So there are a lot of brilliant minds within that organization, and some, are in need of help with whatever challenge they perceive, which I'm trying to support them with, but also yeah, communicating our goal and our societal impact to people outside of that organization is something both really inspiring, but also something really fun.
so a couple of things here that come to mind that I think are good educational points. So imagine you have people listening. Well, there will be people listening all over the world to this. And maybe they are either an organization that's interested in getting involved, or maybe more importantly, it's a person who's a hobbyist or a researcher that wants to safely disclose. What are the things that you advise them to do? You certainly see many situations. Where do they typically need the most help? And maybe a more pointed question is, what are the things that you do? What are the pieces of advice that you typically give? How are you coaching them on this? And if you were being a teacher, like if I were bringing something to you, what are the things that you typically cover with these folks, and to make it a smooth situation?
So imagine a young ethical hacker finding critical or security vulnerability or even a 0 day within a product or a SaaS solution of a major vendor.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, now what? What do I do with this? So we can facilitate that vulnerability disclosure to a specific vendor or to a specific organization where that specific security researcher is not that confident in communicating to that particular organization or software vendor. So we help them along the way of disclosing that vulnerability, and we do that worldwide. So we have a global CSERT where researchers from all over the world are connected with. But yeah, if you are a security researcher and you have some interesting findings, yeah, you can find us on the internet and read we read all about
Sure.
our goals on our website.
Can you share again the full name of the organization? You kind of loosely mentioned it, but I want to make sure we
Yeah,
get it correct, and then I will link it in the show notes.
sure. It's the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure.
Dutch Institute. I missed the institute piece. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No,
No,
I think we weren't planning on talking about that at
no,
all.
I know it was
Uh,
completely out of the blue.
but no, that's lovely, and I think it again begins to answer some of the what else do we do? What else do
No,
we help with? What can we help with?
no,
What skills have we personally developed that will be accretive to solving other types of problems, and arguably help us not only our own company but also benefit others, right? And sort of
no, no,
and there's a feel good element. There's not only solving
definitely.
problems, but there's a you get most of us should get some type of dopamine or feel good out of this, right? To be giving
Definitely.
back in this
Yeah.
way. How'd you get introduced with
Yeah, so it was a couple of years ago. I found them via an ex-colleague of mine who was involved within that organization, and I just applied and I started there. So it's
cool?
really easy. But what's really fun of why it fits so well is that one, the organization is embedded essentially within the cybersecurity space, which I'm really passionate for. But also right, creating an environment and helping people grow within that environment is really fun. So both within that security, cybersecurity space. So that for me ticks all those boxes to yeah, create an impact, but on the side doing something meaningful.
So, not to pick on anyone, but who typically is more difficult to deal with? The young hacker or the organization that is being made aware of a problem and their willingness to fix it in general
Or
terms?
or even a board member at my current CISO role. Yeah, I
Who needs
mean,
more help?
who needs
Typically,
more help? Yeah, I think everyone needs a little bit different help.
a
Yeah.
diplomatic answer.
Yeah.
They're both
Yeah.
very unique, right? And
Yeah.
there's, I can imagine that if you're reaching out to a company or an organization or a board member or a CISO or whomever that isn't familiar with your organization or the mission, you probably get a wide variety of responses, meaning not everyone is going to respond in the same way. Some
Exactly. Yeah,
people,
some
yeah,
don't even respond, right? So if you reach out to a very large software manufacturer, they probably get tens of thousands of vulnerability notifications, and sometimes they don't even respond. So over time, then we make the call. It's better for society that we put this out there, so people are aware of these critical vulnerabilities to minimize the impact in that way.
who typically responds to these things? Just in general, right? So on average, is it someone technical? Is it a lawyer? Is it a automated email? Like what in general? Who typically responds to these when you reach out and say, "Hey, we've identified an issue and we'd like to privately make you aware."
I think it depends on the size of organization or the size of that particular institute, but often than not, those are technical people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So switching gears
yeah,
a little bit here. When we met, we spoke a little bit about this concept of being an architect, and then the firefighter, which we've covered. The sort of the builder and the protector,
yeah.
the designer and the builder, the protector. If you have that in your blood, and you do, one of the things I struggle with in the digital world is this idea of permanence. So when you build something in the physical world, it's left behind. We talked about this, that it's sort of left for the future, or it should be, right? And I grew up on a farm as a kid, and when you were done at the end of the day, you could sort of look at what you had done.
Mm,
Whether you enjoyed doing it or not is another thing, but because
mm,
sometimes it was not the most fun, but it had an element of a change was made, crops were planted, these sorts of things, right? We were building something, we were fixing something.
yeah.
As this person who appreciates being in architecture or maybe even being one, how do you balance that? What is the notion of permanence? Is there a notion of permanence within information security?
Yeah.
Where do you find that in a digital, often disposable world?
Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting question. Um, and I think the permanence or the change you make within people is actually the thing that lasts. So one of my previous CISO roles within a cryptocurrency company yeah, was both organizational and both technical. But what really stayed with me was what my CTO at that time said to me, where he previous to me joining had sleepless nights and yeah, was really terrified of being hacked.
Mm.
Where when I joined and created a resilient organization and made essentially the organization more secure, both on information security and cybersecurity aspect, is he told me he was sleeping well and he was actually feeling safe, and that personal note and that emotional note, yeah, really stayed with me. So it was not actually all the effort I put in on a technical or organizational level, but that emotional, personal note, yeah, really, it created that lasting change.
One of the things I often talk about when doing messaging, especially to executive leaders, especially in crisis, is this idea, and those who listen to the show often will know probably what I'm going to say, but it's this notion of comfort and confidence. They have to believe or be confident in you, but they also have to be comfortable in the situation, meaning your ability to make them feel that way.
Yeah.
And based on what I heard you say, that's something similar because this constituent, this person, I'm guessing was not a technical person, not
Oh,
technical
yeah.
in that
Oh, he was very technical,
he
but
was very
definitely.
technical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he understood the technical risk.
Yeah.
I was operating under the assumption that you had a non-technical individual. And so you couldn't explain the technical to them, so you had to make them feel comfortable and confident in other ways. So I'm wrong.
No, yeah. Yeah.
This person understood the technical,
Definitely. Yeah.
but maybe not the security element of it then?
Um, I think he knew the type of risk and the type of threat the organization was having, and there was a huge uncertainty, yeah, about the whole threat environment. You have to see it this way. The threat landscape of cryptocurrency organizations, brokers, and exchanges are enormous. They're immense. There's nothing like it, even within the banking or any other industry, because literally, North Korean hackers are knocking on your digital door every single day because of the nature of cryptocurrency, the way it's decentralized and the way it's a vast amount of money. And that particular company was hacked prior to me joining, so they knew the impact and they knew yeah, what it actually meant of being breached. Um, so maybe that had a huge part of it as well. No.
That does tend to have a lasting effect. You have the benefit. They had to learn very quickly. So before your arrival, and again, I don't know the organization. It's not important the name of the organization, but the situation is what's key, especially for the show. So you had the benefit of going in after there was a crisis to help sort of make more resilient this company.
Mhm.
So they had a very strong reason to be concerned because they don't want this to happen again, right?
Definitely, definitely.
So
Yeah.
that's an interesting. So how? I mean, again, a teaching moment for those that are in a similar situation. Maybe they're in crypto, maybe not, but they're brought in to be the leader of an information security team post incident, post breach, and they have a technical and an educated supervisor or constituent group. I know it's a tough question to answer succinctly, but what are the handful of things that you think that you did really well to get them sleeping well?
So I dove right into the challenges. So what I did was very transparently showed them where the pain points are and how to solve those. And there again, communication is key, but also transparency is key. So don't have an agenda, just say how it is. And maybe that's very Dutch of me, but just be really straight to the point and yeah, show them yeah, what it's all about.
Do you think the Dutch are generally fairly direct?
Definitely. I heard it a lot.
Uh, I I'm not Dutch that I'm aware of, but I often am told that I'm very direct as well. I used to be very direct. I've softened up a little bit as I've gotten older with the gray hairs, but I tend to appreciate that. Another thing I was going to ask you. So you didn't start at that crypto company. You were at an MSSP prior to that, which that's a whole nother world of
No.
responsibility and measurement of success. Maybe at a
Yeah.
high level, how are the measurements of success different between the two? Because I know you went into a very security aware organization in cryptocurrency where, to your point, everyone is after you and failure is very easy to measure.
No.
Where sometimes at an MSSP, sometimes failure is just considered force majeure, and there's just sort of this thing where we expect like failure is part of the day, right? And in a way that's almost
No.
I've seen in MSSPs, we're like, yeah, it happens.
No.
Like, okay, no big deal. How
Definitely.
did you switch
Definitely.
between these?
Yeah, so for me personally, that was a major growth step in time. Um, During my tenure at the MSSP, you essentially get hired by organizations to protect them and identify risks, or proactively help them become resilient. But it's always a little bit how do you say it, a little bit further away from you. So right, you're working for the MSSP and you're protecting other organizations, where during my time at a cryptocurrency company, I was the guy needing to fix the issues. I was responsible for the information security and cybersecurity of that organization, but also for the customers we were serving. Right, we're trying to protect our customers and their data and their money. Which I remember vividly. Literally during my first week at that organization, I was phoned by the digital what's called the digital trust center within the Netherlands.
Mm.
That one of our internal databases was being sold on a dark web forum called Raid Forums. And I realized, okay, this is me. I'm the guy who needs to fix this. I have to step up, right? Although it was a completely different feeling than back when I was working for the MSSP, which then the scenario was quite similar, but the feeling was very different. And then it ended up being an old database dump, and nothing really was going on. But that feeling, or that was really, really different than from my time at the MSSP.
I only smile because I've been there myself. In fact, I was working with many others. We were collectively working on a very big breach, and we were contacted in the middle of this breach by an organization saying that they had a similar dump, and they claimed that it was related to the problem we were working on. And it turned out to be not even our information, but it was sort of a massive distraction
No.
where, because they reached out to executives first. And so the executives are all excited, as they should be, but you're having to then explain to them what this means. And it can be. And one of my other rules, you may not have heard this yet, but I was having to make introductions to people in a crisis. And this is one of my rules of leadership. Never make an introduction in a crisis, meaning there's powerful people that I'm meeting in the middle of a big problem. I've never met them before. They don't know who I am, and they're angry. And I'm
No.
having to calm them down and earn their trust and educate them, all in the same hot and fiery moment.
No.
And this is not a smart way to live. But
No. No.
sometimes you have no choice. So
No.
your
So
your story reminded me of a story of my own.
no.
Please.
So yeah, exactly. I completely understand where you're coming from. And during moments of crisis, the last thing you want to do is have a call with someone important and powerful and who you don't know and try to explain them the situation and you don't know their attitude or their way of communication. So during instant response or emergency response, the most key thing to do is good communication. Right, without proper communication, you end up nowhere. So that's definitely a hurdle to to overcome. Yeah, definitely. Um,
You just reminded me, or this conversation made me think, there's one of the examples I use from an educational standpoint for tabletop exercise is actually writing your breach notification letter before you have a breach. So write the letter as an exercise because there's all these questions that come about. Well, who writes it? Who signs it? What do we want to say? How do we want to be known? How do we want to notify? How early do we want to notify? All these things.
yeah.
And
But
there's no
also
perfect.
internal communication, right?
Yeah.
So you have external communication, but also internal communication. How you make sure that people are confident, or how are they? How do you guide them through that emergency, and make sure the right informations ends up with the right people, right. So people tend to when there's an emergency, either have a very small team fixing it or a very large team fixing it, and yeah, there is a leeway there, and it's very important to then again do the right communication with the right people to swiftly resolve that emergency.
So a lot of thoughts on that, but the adjacent thought that I had is this idea of introductions. So the idea of getting together people to do the tabletop and then to work on a notification letter is should be to bring together enough people so you practice so you don't have to meet a stranger in a real crisis. But that might be another sort of task or another goal of this is to figure out, who might we have to meet that we don't know, meaning you're a new security leader who haven't I met yet, who are maybe some customers that I might need to contact, who are some partners, who are right, because I want to explicitly avoid that situation. Are
Yeah,
there board members, whomever, right?
yeah,
And then you bring up a really good point. It's not just one letter. It's we've all probably worked on an investigation where it's a need to know situation where you're not going to tell everybody. And a big issue I see, and one that I have experienced, where you're working on a breach, you're working on the response, you need people to behave differently, but you cannot tell them exactly what's happening yet. And so you may need IT help. Hey, I need you to install the software. I need you to make this change. Well, where's the change control ticket? Where the change control is next Thursday, so you gotta have to wait. No, no. I need you to do it right now. And I need to be I'm being polite, but this needs to happen within the next 15 minutes. It needs to begin now, right? And so, how do you prepare an organization for the idea that one day someone may come around and this condition exists? Because I have failed at that there's this
mhm,
special operation that's not documented anywhere. It's not an incident response plan because most of those are garbage.
mm.
They're trash. They don't represent reality. And so I ask the question to you, specifically to if you need people who are not in the need to know to operate differently, how do you do that?
um, so I tackle that in a very broad sense where also with my current organization, I have a security champions program
Okay.
where people from every department are within that security champions group. Also, non-technical people, where they get educated on breaches, on security awareness, on quality, on certain types of ways to do a risk assessment, rapid risk assessments. Um, Essentially, a vehicle for security culture within that organization. And when something happens, or when something is needed, those security champions are very important within that organization um, to bridge that gap from the security function to the other departments.
So you have the program, which I think is a great start, and they are someone who understands security or wants to be a partner, or wants to understand it, and you brief them seemingly more frequently. Is there something within that sort of relationship, or within that maybe training, or within that friendship, where you go to them and say, look, there may be a day where I need you to do something and it's going to violate the normal rules?
Um, not not really in that sense, but we go through certain tabletop exercises. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, the other week we happened to play a game to communicate with a threat actor who conducted a ransomware attack on a specific organization, where as a group of also non-technical people experienced how it felt like to be held ransom
Mm.
by a specific threat actor, and how that worked, and what kind of communication had to be done within our organization to resolve the issue, resolve the emergency, both internally and externally. Um, and People really liked it. People really thought it was insightful. Those people are not part of our internal CERT, right? They're not part of our emergency response team, but they do get to experience a situation like it, and they do get to experience the way a scenario plays out. Yeah, that's I think really helpful and key to also embed within that organization the people who are not directly involved within such an incident, but they do know what's happening, and they do know how to essentially resolve such an issue.
Maybe a silly sounding question, but what to you has been most successful in terms of duration of a tabletop? Because a real incident could last weeks, but you're not going to get people together, for weeks to do these things, right? But it's important to get them together. Is there a magic window of time to do a tabletop, to meet, and to educate, and then to disperse?
Uh, I think you worded it perfectly. Like a magic window. I think there's no such thing as a. I don't think there's a magic window. It's all depend on the type of scenario, of the size of the organization. Yeah, with this specific scenario, we were able to do it within an hour, which is very efficient, yeah, just really rapidly.
That's extremely efficient. I
Yeah.
Most of the more detailed tabletops I've done, or been a part of, some of them I've managed, some of them I created content for, some of them we had outside groups that assisted, but most of the time it was somewhere between 3 and 6 hours.
Hmm.
But I can say that that's a lot to ask. When you get over about that 3 or 4 hour, that's a lot of time. And I don't know that that's optimal. I don't have an opinion. I think it depends on, is this the first time you're meeting as a group, as
Hmm.
an example, right? Has there ever been a tabletop before? Who are the people that are invited? There are, as you well know, more technical related tabletops, and times when you'll bring in high level executives, maybe even board members, and getting their time is,
Yeah. Or even third parties, right? So
yeah,
that's also really fun. Yeah.
good. Well, that's a good point. So one of the areas I see organizations do poorly, very poorly, is client management during a breach. That there's a lot of places that I see organizations fail, but this is one of them, especially depending on how many customers you have. So if you think of somebody that's got a relationship with, I worked at a place a long time ago where we had relationships with many customers, but we also had, then those customers had many employees. And so there's this sort of this many to many situation. And there's an example that I remember very clearly and probably will take to my grave where you have 6 or 7 minutes to get on the phone with your 1,000 largest customers. That's a very difficult thing. And so you in a position of, as a CISO, as somebody who's worked for organizations of various types and shapes that have lots of customers, since you brought that up, anything that you feel like that we could improve on generically as a community when dealing with customer notification, customer sort of management of notification and
Yeah.
making them feel seen and heard?
So what I saw throughout the years is a, a few, probably a few years ago, organizations were very hesitant to communicate to the outside, to the public, that they were breached. Right? They were very hesitant. They didn't want any reputational damage. They didn't want to be transparent enough to show that they had an issue. As of right now, you see a lot of organizations actually embracing that transparency and embracing those communication lines, saying, "Hey, we have an issue. We see a threat actor within our systems. We do everything we can in order to stop the bleeding, stop the breach. Bear with us. We have." Third parties engaged to resolve the incident, to do proper analysis and so on, which actually creates trust for your existing customer base, but also your future customers, showing that you take your responsibility, showing you find this important enough to communicate and to resolve in a swift manner. Which I think is really great. It shows we as an industry are evolving in this particular thing. And I also encourage organizations to do so. So be transparent, of course, in a way, right? Not giving any insights to. To threat actors who might be reading your public media outlets, but definitely have proper external communication to your clients.
I'm going to ask a follow-on question to that. So you mentioned adversaries reviewing your own communications, which is something we should always remember. What is an example of something that you would not want to put in a notice, a public notice, when giving an update on an incident or a breach?
So anything which might trigger that threat actor or that the particular hacker to switch tactics or operations when not fully contained, right? So if you give them any insights which they could leverage to further expand or move their operations, that's definitely a bad move.
Yeah, that's a little different than what I was thinking in the question, but you're
Okay.
absolutely correct there. No, it's fine. So certainly there are cases where you you want to change your communication or omit even any communication as to not tip off the adversary. So if you don't believe that they're contained, to your point, there's an argument not to tell anyone anything until you have a remediation event, which is sort of where you're going to contain and then throw out the adversary, understanding. But in order to do that, you've got to, as you well know, you've got to know How'd they get in? Where have they been? What have they modified? What are their persistence mechanisms? Do they have a multitude of these things? So is that accounts? Or is there some other sort of back door? Is it through a third party? Is it some sort of trust problem that we've got? So that's a given. I was thinking even post-containment. So let's say we've had a remediation event. Using this as an example, my question to you: let's say we believe we've gotten rid of the adversary and that we're clean and we're returning to business to some degree. I thought what you were saying was you wouldn't want to divulge too much within your notice about your capabilities or about systems. So not about an active attack, but sort of general education for the next event was my incorrect assumption. Anything specific to that question, anything that you'd add?
So I think in that particular case, anything related to existing gaps you might have had, it's fine, I think, to say, oh yeah, we upped our security monitoring, or we made improvements in our security posture, but don't go into detail what was actually lacking in your controls or in your mitigations.
I There's an example that some people will know, but very few, where we were sending a notice out, was helping an organization with this, and they sent a note was crafted, and then the note had been edited by well-meaning people, but ultimately, I think it was a legal team that edited this, an outside legal team. And I've actually seen this happen more than once. Funny enough, and this is going to be really weird of an example, but it's a teachable moment, which is why I'm sharing it. In this example, there was no vulnerability that was exploited, meaning there was not a missing patch that then allowed for a vulnerability in the traditional sense. Certainly, there was a vulnerable situation where something was exploited. But when you send a note to the world and saying the vulnerability was remediated, 9 out of 10 people believe that you patched your systems and this is sort of the solution to the ongoing problem. Well, it wasn't. It was a well-meaning edit. So then the inbound questions to this company were, well, tell us about your patching program. What are you not doing in your patching program? And it's all well-meaning, but now we're sort of wasting our time talking about things that patching is important, but it's not related to the problem at hand. It's not. It's this sort of distraction, this diversion to the truth, right? Which is incredibly annoying to me. But I share that. So another piece of advice, I've talked about it on the show before, but make sure that maybe the CISO has the final review of the communication that goes out for this very reason, to avoid this. This has happened. I know of 4 cases of this is where something has been edited and the wrong information goes out that sort of confuses the customers about as to the problem and to why. So teachable moment there. Hey, we are almost at time. Anything else that you so I have 2 more questions for you. One is just in general. Anything else that you would mention about communication, education, in particular around breach response or incident management? That's something very close to my heart, something I can tell you've spent some time doing.
Definitely, yeah.
Maybe advice on that, or maybe on doing a better tabletop before we go to our last question.
I think what's really important post breach is to really take the time to look at your lessons learned and essentially propel your organization forward. So not just bounce back, but bounce forward. So take those lessons learned and improve instead of just returning back to business.
So one of the measures that typically gets discussed, and in my world, and rightfully so, is sort of these mean time to resolution, right? Of mean time to return to the way things were. And I have despite it being common nomenclature, I hate that term because if you're returning to the way you were prior to the incident, that means that you were infirm in some way. You were non-resilient enough. So you need to have a return to better. So the remediation of the problem only takes you back to a weak point. You need to also then track how long does it take to change to improve. So there's two sets of changes that happen. One might be a configuration change after the fact, but what are the things that we're going to do? And it takes the review of what you just mentioned in order to be intelligent enough to make that cause, right? To say, I'm going to do this second step. I'm going to look at my after action report, is what we would call it, our AAR, and figure out what was the real issue. And then how do I make our company more resilient? Is it a protective measure? Is it a detective measure? Or could we get better at response? Is it all the above? And then to measure that in an element of risk. I think that's a fantastic piece of advice to get excellent at the lessons learned.
I think that might be even the most critical resilient KPI there is, right? To actually improve, and how much time does it take to improve?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it can't be immediate. Sometimes there may not be the ability to make an immediate change for a lot of good reasons. You have a change freeze, you have some other things, but then it becomes the decision of the business to make this. But if the security team is not offering this, it'll never get done. Is sort of the lessons. So moving on from that and going to our final question, which is what we ask every guest on this journey of virtual mentorship. So pursuant to the name of our show, which is the new CISO, what does being a new CISO mean to you?
So what I said also during my introduction, I'm really passionate about positioning security as a business enabler, trying to empower the organizations I work for to conduct their business, but also innovate with confidence. I know there are a lot of CISOs struggling within their organization to position themselves as such an enabler. But if you manage to do this, it also makes your life and your job way more fun, but also creating really meaningful impact.
I think the core point of what you shared there is to appreciate the fun and to really sort of savor that, because it's an amazing responsibility, but it's also, I think it's great fun. It's not always fun every moment, but largely we are very fortunate to lead the lives that we do. So, Alan, thank you so much for your advice and for your time and for being a part of this great experiment. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve.
That's it for this episode of the new CISO. Thank you for listening. Check out more episodes on exabeam.com/podcast. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe to get brand new episodes first.